Thanks for checking out this week's FinPrep Trading and Investment Video newsletter. All right, so fantastic bounce there out of Munis MUB ETF, so approximately 2 points there. Price kind of hanging out above the 20-day moving average with your 9 EMA as potential support, overbought in the short term on your fast stochastics as would be expected, but quite amazing volume. You'll see on the weekly chart just a fantastic volume here, stretching back to '08, 1, 2, 3, and here we are at fourth. Very substantial bounce off the long-term trend line. And given volume's quite recent route, really initiating back in about September of this year, this could be a positive sign of things to come. We shall see. But TLT had an interesting spot itself, but some initial signs of life in Munis, no doubt. SPY, per usual, actually didn't quite even make it to the 20-day moving average, or the 218 level, just really held onto that 13 EMA, exponential moving average, taking out the 222 on Wednesday there with vigor. 222 being about nearly 4% above prior all-time highs in summer of 2015, so being at 226 here, about 6% above, really into kind of proper breakout territory, so terrific strength, needless to say, off that move into that 200 DMA at about 208, so fantastic move so far. Clearly overbought very quickly, rotating from oversold to overbought on the ultra-fast stochastics within the matter of a week, and then potential resistance here at 228, which is your trend line, or price which coincides with your trend line off your 420 highs in through much of your summer consolidation, and then price just being jerked right directly into it. So very fascinating stuff. We'll see Fed week coming up this week here, announcement on Wednesday, and monitoring market responses across multiple asset classes. Should be a pretty interesting view on what is to come here next week. But basically, on a similar trend line though, for Dow, basically already took it out. It coincides pretty well with your low of day Wednesday, and then into potential round number resistance, an old trend line here, but more importantly, round number resistance at about 200 on Dow. Similarly for Qs though, we have about 120 here, multiple resistance, about 4 or 5 good touches. So potential for a potential breakout, although overbought in the near term. So could pull in. We'll see. And a little bit of a reversal here on end of week on the trannies, but won't make too much of it. Really got event risk here coming into next week. But TLT, again, continuing to lose that 120 level, and really on that substantial long-term trend line, which more or less marks its price channel, right? So 1, 2, and then essentially 3. Now you're very hard move, though, off this top of the trend line. And here we are in a potential support, 116 here on the TLT, oversold like a son of a gun on the weekly fast stochastics. So again, Fed week coming up here. Could this potentially be a point at which treasuries would base? If so, that's going to have some very interesting implications potentially for GLD, and we'll take a look at the recent correlation there at the end of the video. But UUP dollar index basically found support at low of day off this gap up here, took out the 20-day moving average, but again, finding support at about 25.80. And then really the strong end of week move is going to coincide with what we saw in Euro, and basically reaction out of ECB decision to taper, sending Euro lower, and UUP consequently higher given its significant weighting. But looking at gold here quickly, gold fading off that 9 EMA, as we've seen on multiple charts, and on Friday really in particular taking quite a shot, and we'll see a similar move on the yen, and basically in neutral territory on its ultra fast stochastic. So could there be further downside? We shall see. Again, it's probably going to depend quite significantly on response to Fed announcement, but price currently hanging out at that pretty significant 110 level, which coincides with your weekly chart, capping multiple bear market rallies and providing some support here to some of this initial bounce that we've had so far. So GLD at a very interesting juncture. SLV seemingly indicating some potential bullishness for the complex as a whole, but won't jump to too many conclusions. Overbought on the fast stochastics, but currently holding above its 20 DMA, so and above multiple resistance points here, some consolidation. So we'll see if there's some life, or is it just going to get hit the hardest next week? Don't know, but we'll find out. GDXJ following move, gold's moved down, holding up nicely above the 20-day moving average for the week until Friday, getting smacked. But even GDXJ having pretty significant support, multiple touches, and around this 33.5 roughly. Copper consolidating its breakout move above its long-term downtrend, which essentially defines its bear market, stretching back to 2011. Doesn't look quite as clean on the weekly, but on the daily you arguably have the pennant formation with potential bullish implications. We'll see. Recalling again our late move in the week there on GLD, but basically here's your yen FXY tracking ETF, consolidation sideways into your declining 9 EMA, and then good night on Friday. So we'll see if there's further downside. It basically is neutral, approximately under ultra fast stochastic. So we'll see if there's any more room to run to the downside, or we'll just kind of hang out until we get Fed day out of the way. Euro, on the news of taper, essentially did head lower and quite sharply. So here we are, basically again flirting with the 103. So the question is, do we get a proper breakdown off that level and stretching into new lows for euro and a drift towards parity? We shall see. We shall see. Nice fade out of the British pound. Basically, didn't quite get into that upper trend line on that potential bear flag, but faded and currently holding above your 20 DMA. And so the question here is this lower trend line going to hold, or are we going to take it out? So basically, you had your referendum, Brexit referendum sell-off, sideways consolidation on your weekly chart. Probably easier to see. Move close into that 20-week moving average. Not quite, but essentially sideways consolidation, breakdown, and here we are, an arguable bear flag with your overbought on your ultra fast weekly stochastic. So preliminary downside, we'll see if there's further to run. But yeah, pretty interesting week ahead. Fascinating moves out of the bond complex. Question here is, does TLT find a bid? If it does, just looking very quickly here at gold's relation to TLT, has fluctuated significantly over the past, but the second half of this year in particular has been a very tight correlation with GLD and TLT. So both basically going down quite sharply in tandem, in other words, right? As they both lost in price, as we've been seeing for multiple weeks now. So 110 being a 116 being a very interesting pivotal zone potentially for TLT. Will 110 be as well? They both kind of lined up very interestingly on the chart. So if TLT can find a bid, can GLD be carried along with it? And again, we'll monitor the correlation, the much more established longer-term positive correlation with GLD and the Japanese yen FXY tracking ETF. But in the short term here, GLD and TLT are finding a quite tight match with each other. So very interesting stuff, and we should look for some pretty interesting signs of life next week. All right, so take care, guys.